All right, this is round 3. I did not have a read on this opponent either. I think, if I recall, SDNB. So their posted lists from earlier, I guess from a month ago, they had one dredge and one squee list posted. But that's not a very good sample size for a hard read. So I wasn't going to be too... wasn't going to mulligan too aggressively for a dredge hand, but something like this. This is kind of interesting. Very bad against dredge. I mean, does absolutely nothing against dredge. Good against like a control mirror, because I have ancestral covered like 3 different ways. I have merchant scroll for my own ancestral, but I mulligan it. That may be a little too aggressive. I think in retrospect I put a little too much emphasis on their Bazaar lists. I think that hand is very bad against Bazaar. It's too slow. Whereas this, I don't know about you. I see this card in my opening hand. If I can cast it, I keep it. I like it too much. What did I bottom there? It was another land. It must have been another land. I think it was an argument to bottom the Brain Freeze. But again, if this is dredge, if it's an aggro deck, having the Brain Freeze in hand, this could potentially be a turn 2 or turn 3 win if I really need it to be. So I think that's justifiable. Also, the third land has very little utility if I'm not getting wastelanded. Oh yeah, bottom the island. And then having the island in my deck to fetch out with the Flooded Strand is also kind of important here. But my opponent leads with Polluted Delta, Cracked Delta, Basic Island, top. That's not Bazaar. And a Chrome Mox. Sorry, Mox Opal, not Chrome Mox. Okay. Well, things change. Now my Tundra is safe. I know I'm not playing against Wasteland, so I can lead with that. And I'm just going to fire off Ancestral here. It's not good against Fluster. I wonder if they would have held up Fluster last turn against a known opponent. I'm not sure. But they don't have Pyroblast up. I think I'm fine to fire off the Ancestral. And they Brainstorm. Actually, I think there's some merit in forcing this Brainstorm. I think this could be just trouble for my opponent, but with a top to maybe clear themselves out of it, I'm not going to push the issue that hard. And good thing I didn't, because I can force. Again, I could maybe force with the Brain Freeze, but I think having one consider here, along with my hopefully 3 cards from Ancestral, is... I'm hopeful it's good enough. And I kind of draw into the nuts. So, my opponent uses their top. Nothing here is surprising. And I start with Consider. Flusterstorm. So here, I don't know yet whether I'm playing against PO or a different Tinker Saga deck, but Mox Opal pretty much. I think that signals PO. I bin the Flusterstorm. I am not a big fan of Flusterstorm in this matchup, plus I already have a Pyro and a Force. All I really want is action. I don't need more interaction. But we fire off a Git Probe, and we see they have just a Scalding Tarn in hand. And that's fantastic. So they have top, and they have a Saga, but they don't have a lot else going on. And I think my opponent makes a pretty big blunder here. Yeah, I think this is really bad. Maybe they have to. But really the problem here is not only is this Ancestral really exposed to basically, I mean, I've considered twice. The odds that I cannot interact with this Ancestral are very low. So unless their last card is like a Flusterstorm, that would make a lot more sense. But the biggest problem here, they don't have a Saga activation. So I can just freely Pyroblast this. And then here I think I'm going to be calling up Lurrus is my guess. Or maybe I dig through time. Yeah, I think I dig through time first, I guess. I don't know about this. I like doing it now versus waiting, but I think I would have liked the Lurrus. Oh, I guess the downside to Lurrus is I don't have any food for Lurrus. So even if I play a Lurrus, it just doesn't do anything. So I can get on board with this. So here, though, this is fun. I don't love Ragavan because of the top. But top is on the top of the deck right now. So I could take Ragavan, dash it with the Mox and the Valk, take their top, and then if I have a Swords, I can deal with the Saga, the Construct. I can force whatever they draw. So I think I take Ragavan and Swords here. Because I've already played a land, I can't take the Strip Mine to deal with the Saga. Oh, I take Ledger Shredder instead. Interesting. I don't know what I think about that. I think I would have preferred the Ragavan. Clear off the top. I still Swords next turn. I have Force Up regardless. Yeah, I think that's what I should have done. But I play the bird. Opponent's probably going to make a Saga token. Finally turns on their Opal. Their hand should be top and an unknown, and they get the Soul Ring. So they play top, spin top. And play a fetch land. So they're out of cards, but they can re-spin the top. Ponder. So I'm looking to play these two this turn. Trigger my Connive. And then probably not pull up Lurrus, but the mana may work out for me. And I see these. Do I even want this? I don't really need a second Swords. Mystical Tutor, I've already cast my Ancestral. Don't really need another land. I think I might shuffle these. No, I kept the Mystical. Yeah, I kept the Mystical. I think that's fine too. Mystical for like a Flusterstorm, I guess. Let's see what we draw here first, because we're going to be doing this anyway. And this is interesting. So they top. It's probably for a Flusterstorm. Yeah, and so it's actually really interesting because now this means I can actually discard the fetch, play the real land, call up Lurrus, and there's a Swords to Plowshares on the top of my deck. So I'm going to eat one attack here. My opponent's going to replay their top. I let it resolve. I could have forced it, but again, like this top, I don't think this is what the game is going to be revolving around right now. I think I'm going to be able to keep up with their one card per turn with top if they're spending all their time spinning it. Now we do it for real. Play the Lurrus.
now we can discard the Brain Freeze pretty freely. It's a little bit annoying if it gets exiled, but who cares? I have a Lurrus and a Ledger Shredder on board. This game is functionally over. They have a lot of powerful draws in their deck. I mean, they still have POs and Tinkers, and they have an active top. But I just don't care. Play a key, doesn't matter. Play Demonic Tutor. Well, I'm going to draw my card first. And here, probably pitch the Breach. I'm going to pitch the Brainstorm. I guess I'm looking to untap and win next turn, maybe. And I just get this nonsense out of here. So the Demonic Tutor, it does two things. One, I mean, they have Sagas in their deck, so maybe they just get a Saga, and I can't interact with it. I don't really care about that. I think more interestingly, it's a shuffle effect for their top. They know they're at this point their top 2 cards. It's a top and one random card, or one other card, and they already have one shuffle effect. But this just gives them so many more looks for a good card, on top of being priced into countering whatever they get from the tutor anyway. So. Okay, so here we can start value breaching, I think is the play. We're going to breach an Ancestral like twice. I'm going to leave the island in hand so that we can connive it away. We keep the Misty so that we can put an extra card in the yard in case we need to. Do it again. I mean, this game is over. There's no way they're coming back from this. Doing it again, maybe? No, at this point, Merchant Scroll for a Force Will and just get the check mark. Because again, I can rebuy a Breach every turn. They're just never getting out of this. And this is, I think, deterministic here. I guess not literally because I don't have the time walk in here, but I know their top card is bad. So they're going to have to shuffle and take a blind draw anyway. Plus, top and Manifold Key can maybe do some things that I just don't want to deal with. And now it's like actually locked. Because that's the combo kill. Cool. Game 2. Let's look at the sideboarding for this too. I think it's a fun exercise. So here, took out the 2 Swords to Plowshares. I took out the Force of Negation. I think there's some value in Force of Negation against these Tinker decks. But against PO specifically, a lot of the action, even if it doesn't literally get forced on my end step, it essentially gets forced on my end step. So if they PO for 4 on my end step and I'm sitting there with a Force of Negation, even if it means I have their Tinker covered when they untap, they still drew 4 cards or 5 cards or whatever. That's just not a winning position. Trimmed a Bauble. I trimmed the Tundra for a Wasteland. I think I could have actually also cut the Island. So I like cutting the Island in spots where it's not under pressure from my opponent. They don't have Wastelands, and so that Island is a little less important. The reason I cut the Tundra is because these swords aren't in the decks, so I don't have as many white sources and white cards, and so the Lurrus is the only real white source in the deck, and they don't attack my Tundras, so I think it's fine. But my heuristics here were learned before I put the Island in the deck. And then the Bauble's in here too. I don't have any Shattering Sprees. I do have 1 Prismatic Ending in the deck. 4 Pyroblast and 2 Flusters.
So, hand looks great. Love these. And Get Probed is like my favorite card in these mirrors. Blue matches. Opponent leads with a kind of a scary opener, but no payoff, and I have things covered. But their hand is also really good. They have the Island, so I may be able to strip mine it, maybe not, we'll see. And here, I bobble my opponent because I'm going to be wasting this turn. But they show a Misty, so it means the strip mine is essentially on Saga duty. I'm not going to try and color screw them. Island Ponder. It's really tempting to misstep this, but the problem is they have their Mystical Tutor, and this Mystical Tutor is really free to get Ancestral if I use my mental misstep here. So I think I just let it go. We'll see if they shuffle or not. They do not shuffle. So we know this island's gone and this ponder is gone. And we know they have one unknown card among there. So I think we're going to lead on a fetch. Yep. Okay. So a lot just happened. My opponent cracked their fetch, played a Time Walk, and then played Mystical Tutor. And I chose not to mental misstep it. So I was punished by them going and getting Tinker. Right now their hand is Tinker, unknown card, and they're Force Will, unknown card, and they're drawing the Tinker. I think in retrospect, I should have mental misstepped the Tinker, or the Mystical Tutor. My thinking was they were probably getting Ancestral, but with this board, I don't think that's a fair assumption. I think Tinker is going to be the get far more often than Ancestral, because Tinker threatens to actually end the game. And so what we're going to find is they Tinker, I counter, they counter back, and then I'm dead in the water to this Bolas' Citadel. So I try to fight through it, but this Mentor, there's no comeback from this. So, all right, game 3. See if I changed anything up for game 3. I remember I strongly considered putting in one of the Shattering Sprees. I think it's an okay card. Like, I don't love it here. It's really good in a spot where you can tag a Citadel with it, but in most cases where they have a Citadel, you're already dead. It's never going to tag a Sensei's Divining Top, and the mana denial plan with your Wastelands isn't really about the mana denial, it's more about keeping Sagas off the board. That said, it does clean up Saga tokens very well, so I think there's an argument for the first copy here. And this hand is great. It's okay. Notably, Black Lotus and any 3 lands calls up Lurrus, casts Lurrus, and recasts Lotus. So that's always a really, really clean avenue toward a Lotus, toward a Lurrus on turn 3, plus an additional spell. We get a Bobble ourselves, and we have Force backup. So, I mean, all of this is just kind of, fine. A Pearl on top, I think I'm fetching it away. Pearl on top is actually good in that it lets me do my Lurrus thing a turn early. But it doesn't let me cast it a turn early. Does it? Yeah, I guess it kind of does with the Lotus. But I don't really want to force the action with just a Lurrus, because the problem is if I'm using both my forces to land my Lurrus and play a Black Lotus, I don't have anything else going on. And so if my opponent has anything behind, it's just really bad for me. So they play Lotus, they play Opal, they play Saga, they play Sol Ring, and a Ponder, and pass. And I just let all that happen. Interesting. So I can keep Expressive Iteration as a pitch card. I can cast Expressive Iteration off a Lotus. I can play a land and pass. Or I can play a land and cycle the iteration. I do have some number of zeros that I can hit. I think I want to save the Lotus. The problem with using the Lotus on the iteration is I'll have 2 floating blue mana and a lot of reactive cards in my deck. So I think playing Lotus and then iteration and trying to spike either a land or 2 castable cards, I think that's bad. It's very likely leaves off with me spending these 4 cards and maybe getting 1 card back for it. So I think that's out. I think I really like playing a land and passing, but that does play behind their Saga a little bit. So in game, I think what I end up doing is fetching for a Tundra, because we know we're going to want to do that anyway. Playing the Lotus. Yeah, and then playing the Iteration and cycling it. Now, this still lets me cast a lot of piles off of my Lotus if I need to. So in this case, it doesn't. I mean, it could. If I wanted to cast this Consider, I could. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Consider to hand, exile the ending, and then put the island back in my deck. Or maybe exile the island, yeah, and put the ending back in my deck.
Now, this isn't great, but I think it was okay. I'm playing behind the Saga, though, so that this is kind of becoming a problem. My opponent seemingly has nothing, though. But that's a fantastic card. So what does Breach let me do here? I'm not quite in combo kill territory yet, but I'm really close. But I am in value breach territory with my Lurrus if I can get the Lurrus out. So I think the priority for this turn is probably casting the Lurrus. No, apparently the priority of this turn is Consider into Flusterstorm. Okay, I kind of buy this also. Like, my Breach in hand is so much better if I don't need to use it to bring back the Lurrus. If I can just Breach kill them. If I go for a Breach, or if I go for a Lurrus and they counter it, I'm spewing both forces or a force on my Consider. And I'm not really getting a lot for it. So, okay, I can kind of buy this. And if I considered into, say, a Dress Down, this turn plays out very differently. So my opponent does kind of the obvious thing. Gets a Mana Crypt. I don't know if that informs anything. A Soul Ring is gone, so not really. Black Lotus is gone. I don't think it really tells me anything. Although I'm probably glad that they did not get a Manifold Key here. Not having to respect Vault Key makes my decisions a lot easier. And they just pass. So it's go time. I'm playing behind both these construct tokens, and they have me facing lethal damage. So I have to do something. Lurrus buys me a turn as a blocker if I really needed to. So at least there's that. Buys me turn as a blocker and recast a Bauble. It lets me do that and cast a Ponder if I need to. So you know, we got some things to do. We're gonna start with Ponder. Casting off the Valk because we could need this white mana when we have an extra Valk here. We could need the white mana for swords. Those aren't going to do it. So I shuffle Merchant Scroll. What the hell does Merchant Scroll do? Oh. Merchant Scroll's really good here. Merchant Scroll gets Brain Freeze. And that should be lethal with Force and Fluster backup, right? So we'll find out here. Start with the scroll. Brain Freeze. Okay, so they force, pitching PO. We force back, pitching force. They fluster. So let's let that resolve, right? KOs our force, and then we fluster back. This is dangerous. Like this is still, any fluster gets us. We have just enough that we can power through their mana. A mental misstep gets us. Technically, a Force of Will would have gotten us already. But they kind of had the worst possible here for us. I guess Ancestral would have been worse if they hadn't cast it yet. Yeah, they haven't cast Ancestral. Thankfully, it's just a PO. So they're going to draw 3 cards. And then they're going to draw 3 more. The Ancestral resolves. Or in the Underworld Breach resolves. So here, I think there's merit to... I don't like that they have 1 blue open. I don't know if there's anything that it really matters for. They've already cast their Ancestral. They would have cast a Brainstorm or a Fluster or anything that matters. But I think I cast the Lotus just to get it on board. And then I go post-combat and kill. I don't know if that was actually relevant. But I was able to cast the Lotus twice and Brain Freeze myself. And that was round 3. Interesting match. I think some really good takeaways here. I would have been better served if I didn't make that soft read on pregame. I think I would have had a better time in game 1 against with my original 7. But I did mulligan into a very playable 6-card hand, so I can't be too mad about that. So, thank you for watching.